My name is Tina Keto. I'm a Homeworks by Precept consultant and a homeschooling mom. We have been homeschooling our kids now for just about a decade, and we just love it. Today, I want to talk to you about standardized testing. I get a lot of questions about standardized testing and why we choose to use it in our homeschool family, if we use it, and why we choose to use it. Because the states that I've lived in are low regulation homeschooling states. They're states where standardized testing is not required, and so many homeschool families are trying to discern how often they should test, if they should test, why they should test, and what the benefit would be for them. So I'm just going to take a few minutes today and just discuss why we do this, how we do it, what we use, and how often we use it. So let's start off with why we test our kids. So we have chosen to test our kids with standardized tests for a few different reasons. I love knowing where my kids stack up against the national norm, not because we are in any kind of competitive race or anything like that. Every child is on their own course, but it is good to have a gauge of where they are and where they've been and where they're headed. And so what I really enjoy is testing. It can be stressful, it can be anxious. I know a lot of parents say that they don't want to test because they don't want to know, right? Like, if I don't have to, I don't want to know, because that might tell whether or not I have failed as a homeschool mom. And honestly, I think we all kind of get that feeling when test time comes, that we feel like it's a test for us. Like, did we do our job? Just please remember that when you're doing the test, it is to better understand what your child has learned. It's a snapshot of one day and how he did on that test that one day. But it also, in the long term, if you do it every year, there's a huge benefit to it. You're able to see that progress that they make year after year. You're able to see not only how they stack up nationally, but you're able to see the progress they make. So even if they do really well and you say, well, my kid did great, I used the Iowa test, they got a 13 plus on most things, I don't need to test them for the rest of the year. I don't need to test them through the rest of high school because, they're in 5th grade and they already got 13 plus. Well, there's a huge benefit to testing annually. I have a kiddo that does that, and that is absolutely fine, but that doesn't mean that he is post-high school in his studies at 5th grade. It means that when he took that 5th grade test, he did as well as a high school or a 12th grader would, or a child that's graduating high school would on that 5th grade test. Doesn't work the other way around. So there's a benefit to continuing even to test those kids that do really well, because each year, if they continue on that same trajectory, you know that they are gaining a year of knowledge, that they have gained a year of academic knowledge. So you can actually break it down, and it's broken down by months on the Iowa test, and I believe so on the standardized Stanford as well. We use Iowa, so the information that I'm going to be giving you is going to be based off of using the Iowa test. So there's a huge benefit. And if your child does not do how well as you expect them to in an area, that's an area of opportunity. And so it is a blessing just to know where they're at. If your kid is not a good test taker, that's okay too. But to be able to keep testing them and to be able to know where they're at and how they're doing and have a record of those things can be a real benefit, and just a tool for you as a parent to use as you see fit for your homeschool. I really enjoy, another reason why we like doing the testing and doing the Iowa test is because it is a test that it's not being reported. It's a private test. I own the test. When I order it, I'm ordering it, I'm paying for it, I own the test, I own the results, and I'm the only one that's going to be seeing those results. This isn't a state standardized test, it is a nationally normed test, which is fantastic because it does give that big picture of how your kiddos might be doing and how my kiddos are doing, but it's not something that's going into like a state system. And so that's something that I know a lot of homeschoolers appreciate, that there's that anonymity in that aspect. How often do we test? We test every year. Some homeschool families choose to test every 2 years. They choose to test maybe at certain benchmarks, we start in third grade because we have the option not to test before then. We don't. Third grade is when we start, and then we test every year after that. And so the reason why we don't do every other year testing and we do annual testing is because I feel like that gives us the gift of time. If we are testing every year instead of every other year, if there's something that maybe I missed or that they're not gaining as much ground in as I had hoped or had thought, we have the gift of time because I'm doing it every single year. It gives me that much more time to change what we're doing, how we're approaching things, and help to change the results and to give us more time to achieve the results that we are looking for that particular child. So we test annually. What test do we use is the Iowa test, as I had mentioned. We have used another test that BJU Press Testing and Evaluation does not offer. We did that 1 year. So it has been really interesting to see the results of that test and then the results of the Iowa test. And one thing I have learned is that the Iowa test, especially the Iowa test Form E, which is what is being used in the paper test and the online test, gives you a lot of information as a parent. We also have done the COGAT, which is the Learning Abilities Test, and that was really neat. I get a lot of questions about the COGAT. What is that about? You know, what is that extra test? Do I need it? It is not a test that you need to do every year. I think there's a great benefit as a homeschool parent having my kids having taken the COGAT. It's just one additional test. It adds a day of testing online when you're doing the Iowa online, and about a day of testing if you're doing it with the paper test. But it's a learning abilities test, and what's really fun about that one is it kind of tells their aptitude for learning, and it's also a critical thinking test. And so that coupled with the achievement test, which is the Iowa test, gives a more full picture. One thing I found really helpful was the predictive score versus the achievement score. So when you do the COGAT, you do get that predictive score of based on the the COGAT abilities test. They project what a child had the ability to potentially achieve that year, and then you're able to look at their actual achievement scores and you're able to see what they achieved. And so you can see whether your child is really working up to their potential or if there's opportunity for them to maybe work a little bit harder in that particular area, or just area for growth, or whether you can say, you know, I know that subject's really hard for you, but it looks like you're working really hard and you're doing a really good job. So that's been really great. One thing to note with the cognitive scores is even if they are lower, they are critical thinking. They are something that can be worked on, and your child can grow in their cognitive abilities, and that's something that can be learned. So don't be discouraged if you do have low cognitive ability scores for your child that aren't quite where you were hoping they would be for their age. There are things that you can do. Contacting your homeworks consultant, contacting BJU Press Testing and Evaluation is a great way to find out things that you can do to help build those critical thinking skills for your child and help them to grow as an individual. So that can be helpful, but I really enjoyed the COGAT. I will do it again in 2 years. It's not recommended every year. That's not necessary, but we did it last year, so we won't be doing it this year, but next spring we will plan to do the COGAT again just to get a good picture where our kiddos are at. One other thing to note with the COGAT, I really did like that the really good printed report that I got, as well as at the bottom of the report you could see this code that you can go online and you put in this special code based on the things that your child, you know, the results from your child's COGAT test, and there is a huge amount of information based on, you know, just ideas for teaching to that particular child, where their frustration points might be and where their abilities might be and how to help them grow further as a individual. And I found those really helpful and really fascinating because I read them and I felt like the test like knew my kid, and so that was really interesting to look at and say, oh my goodness, like that's exactly what our situation is in our learning. So that's really good. It's a benefit to add that COGAT test every so often. as often as every 2 years. The other option is there's paper tests and there's online tests. So BJU Press Homeschool Testing and Evaluation offers the Stanford as well as the Iowa and the Iowa Online. A lot of families are preferring the Iowa test. The norms are, they have more current norms, and they're just a lot more homeschool friendly in a lot of ways, and it's just become a preference. We have chosen to use it, and the benefit of that at this point is that you can do paper tests and you can do online tests, and they are the same test. So what's been a big benefit for us this year, and even our homeschool community, is that we generally do paper tests, and that this year we're just not having the opportunity to meet and do the paper tests, but that's okay, because parents can still do the Iowa online, and it's going to be the same test, and they're going to get their results and still be able to see the progress that their kiddos have made. We've done the paper test. This year we're doing the online with the Iowa, and some of the benefits with the online is that you do not need a bachelor's degree to administer it to your child, because it's actually, the testers are actually in South Carolina, and they are going to be administering the test. You're just going to be overseeing the test, and it's going to be online. You can use a Chromebook, an iPad, a computer. It's very simple. You download a secure browser, you check to make sure that you have a fast enough internet speed, and then you're given all the directions that you need from the testing service at BJU Press Testing and Evaluation. So it's a very simple process. It's something that is very doable for families, and can be done very quickly. It takes 2 days if you're doing it online, just the Iowa Form E. If you're doing the Iowa plus COGAT, it's 3 days of testing. It moves along very quickly. It's not something that's going to take up too much of your time. It's actually even more efficient than doing the paper test and getting together with a group. So you do have the benefit of it not taking a full day and having a lot more free time on each end of the testing. I hope you have found this video helpful, and some tips for just some more information on testing and whether or not you need to test your child, and maybe some things to consider when choosing whether or not to test your kids, as well as which tests to choose. Happy homeschooling.